If you're looking at a scenario where a ship might be transporting military weapons, illegal weapons to another country, it stops at port, it weighs 5.5. When it leaves, it weighs 8.5. And then it goes to an illegal port, drops off weight, and now it's 5.5 again. You know that it has picked something up, taken it there, and dropped it off. Anything other than, I will say, finding security leaks on something like TikTok.
I would never have thought of TikTok being the place to get security information, but okay, let's show us. Hey everyone, it's David Bombal back with the team at OSINT Curious. Rae and Micah, welcome. Rae, you're going to be doing the main presentation, so let's start with you. Tell us a bit about yourself and welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, my name is Rae Baker. I am on the executive board of OSINT Curious. I've worked as an OSINT analyst for about 3 years now. I kind of specialize in maritime OSINT, which I believe we will be talking about today. I volunteer for a lot of organizations that do OSINT, like the National Child Protection Task Force and Operation Safe Escape. So I kind of live and breathe OSINT.
That's great. And Micah, you've been on before, but give us a quick overview.
I have. Thanks for having me back, David. I really appreciate it. I'm Micah Hoffman, also from the OSINT Curious project. I also run a training company called My OSINT Training. I do open source intelligence games at OSINT Games, and I am just a person that loves all things open on the internet.
So just for everyone watching, Micah and I have been discussing bringing different people with different specialities to the show. Let us know the types of OSINT stuff that you're interested in learning about. Rae, your speciality is to do with boats and ships and stuff on the seas. Is that right?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I fell into, yeah.
So do you want to take it away? I don't want to hold you back. Take us on this journey. Show us how we can use OSINT to find stuff, I believe, on the high seas.
Sure. So first of all, maritime OSINT, it has to do with boats and ships and other vessels that are on the ocean or sea or any kind of water, really. So we're talking tankers, yachts, cargo ships, military vessels, submarines, undersea drones, anything that is in the water. And these are generally all trackable, and they have crew, which can be looked at. They have technology that is not very secure at all. And these are the types of things that, as an OSINT analyst, I am looking into regularly.
I mean, that's amazing. I didn't realize you could track submarines and things.
Well, submarines are a little tricky. So ships and vessels are required at a certain weight to transmit data. And that's so that other ships don't run into it. And the ports can keep track of where the ships are. So this is the Automatic Identification System, or AIS. And it pings out and it says, data like where the ship is, how much it weighs, how fast it's going, all sorts of data, its identification numbers. That is what we use to track its position. If it's a military vessel, it doesn't want you to track, so it turns
Exactly.
it off. So submarines are hard to track that way. You have to do it by satellite.
Satellite or vision, right? Because a lot of ports have people with webcams and port cams that are watching the vessels that are coming in and out. And as the submarines come in with their tails up, people are reading what the flags are, what the serial numbers are, or not serial numbers, the vessel numbers are. And they actually have these databases where they are saying this vessel was in this port at this date and time, and here's a picture to show it. So sometimes we do use that user-supplied data to do our work.
Very often, yes. Shipspotting.com is one of the ones that I use a lot. And I could show that if you want me to show that.
Oh, yeah, the more the merrier. So take it away.
So shipspotting.com is where users who track ships for fun, there's plane spotters, ship spotters, all train spotters. It's just people who enjoy looking at these things. So they go to ports or airports and things, and they just take pictures and they record the details and they upload them. So on shipspotting.com, you can go and you can type in a ship or a port or a photographer, and you can search for pictures of the ship. I just put in SIG because that's one that I know, and it doesn't show up here, but Signal Alpha is one that shows up a lot, and it'll show you close-up shots of it. Here you can see its name. You can see what's on the deck. You can get information about its identity, its IMO number, which is its official number. You can think of an IMO number like a registration number for a car. It doesn't change. The MIMSI number is more like a license plate where it's an identifier, but it can change. So all these details can be found on ship spotting. And the reason that this is useful is because ships that are doing illegal activity tend to mask their identity. So they will do things like change their name in the AIS system on the ship, which you can do rather easily. And you can broadcast that you are another ship. So if you are the Signal Alpha and you are smuggling something, you would maybe broadcast out that you are ship number 2 instead of Signal Alpha. So everybody who's looking at the AIS will think you're a different ship. But if somebody took a picture of the ship at the same time where that ship was supposed to be and it said Signal Alpha on the side, you could verify that it was not that ship.
I mean, in recent times, I know we won't get into the political side of things, but I know a lot of some of the big yachts owned by some very rich people have turned off their signals, haven't they? So they can hide where they are.
Yes. Yeah. This has been around for a while. Spoofing and GNSS manipulation, the global navigation system manipulation. They do this, military vessels do this a lot. They will share identification numbers. So one ship will pretend to be another ship while it goes and does a military mission, and then it will shift back. So when you look at the tracks, you see it jump. I mean, it might jump across the country in a straight line and back. And that shows that it's faking who it is or where it is.
So, I mean, who's interested in this stuff? I mean, I can assume there's people, like have a hobby wanting to, like train spotting type thing. But I'm assuming there's a whole reason that you as an OSINT investigator are tracking these things.
Geopolitically, yes, it's very important. The government is interested in where ships are, what they're doing, especially military or sanctioned vessels who might be transporting illegal oil from a country to a sanctioned country, or smuggling or pirate activity near like Somalia. That's one. Another one would be just there are specific areas around the world that get a lot of traffic. We saw with the Suez Canal, the Ever Given, when that got stuck, how much that affected all of the traffic and all of the shipping in the entire world. So these straits, these important areas are also important geopolitically, but they're important to all of us because of just general shipping. So that's a lot of what I do.
It's amazing. I mean, I remember when that boat or ship got stuck. I must use the right term, right? When that ship got stuck in the Suez Canal, how it affected so much of the supply chain in the UK.
It did.
We were really affected by it. Yeah.
Yeah, and places like Russia, they utilize shipping lanes, like they are trying to make the Northern Sea route above Russia an important shipping lane, and that's very important to them monetarily. Like that would make them a lot of money. And the Caspian Sea is another one. Now that they're being sanctioned, they're using the Caspian Sea to get oil to Iran. So the shipping routes are very important as well. And it's important to the supply chain in general. So as an OSINT analyst, I'm more on the like geopolitical and illegal activity side, but there are people who do like supply chain research who are just following cargo vessels and where the cargo is coming and going.
Rae, David mentioned earlier about pirates and all. And, I have to think that if I'm a pirate and I'm going to be doing some illegal activity, I'm not going to be running AIS. I'm going to be doing other things. But you mentioned there's satellite imagery and other stuff out there to track those vessels that are trying to hide. Do you? I know that you focus on geopolitical issues. Do you find yourself using other resources as well as things like ShipSpotter here or ShipSpotting.com to research what actually is happening on the high seas?
I do, and I can kind of run through a scenario of something that I might do. One thing I find really interesting, and I don't think it gets talked about a lot, is undersea cables. There are ships, their job is to lay cables under the sea. That's what they do. They have a big cable thing on the back and they just lay it. And a lot of these cables connect countries or places. And if that cable was cut, it would cut off the entire area. If it's an island, it would cut it off from internet. So there
Yeah, that
are
happened
ways
recently
to
with the volcano. Sorry to interrupt. It happened with a volcano in the South Pacific or something, if I remember right.
Yeah, and there was one in it was called the Svalbard cable in the Norway area that was just cut, and it was cable that was transmitting data to a lot of satellites or something. It was very important, and they thought Russia was behind it, but nobody ever proved what actually cut it. I've heard that people use smaller ships and they pull, not a drone, I guess it's an undersea vessel that cuts the cables. They just like sail over it and cut it. There are a few undersea cable maps that you can use. This is the one I like to use, Subtel Forum. So you can go here and you can see all the cables that exist in the world and where they go, who owns them, and you can find a vessel on here. So I have one already picked out. So Ocean Titan is a vessel that lays cable, so we can see exactly where it is right now. It is near Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, wow. So you can
That's-
actually see where if they're in the middle of the ocean busy laying the cables, right?
Yep, you can see it. And this is its AIS. It's this call sign. It would show its ETA, latitude, longitude, all sorts of details here. The project name for the cables that it's laying is Fermina. We can actually see this ship live. So I use marine traffic to track vessels. They have a free version. The difference between the free version and the pay version is the free version only lets you track current time. You have to pay to get historical. But if we come here and we do Ocean Titan, we can see what the Ocean Titan looks like. It's a research vessel, its IMO number, and it gives us the current port Jacksonville. That's what we just saw on the Subtel forum. And you can do show on live map, and it'll show you right where it is, and that kind of verifies that it's right where it says it was.
And Rae, is that using latitudes and longitudes, like GPS coordinates from the ships and where the ship's saying, "Hey, I'm at this location," or "I'm underway under my own power, and I'm traveling this many knots in this heading"? That'll all show up live on this type of site, right?
Yep. So it uses,
or not live, but
yeah, it uses its AIS, so it's broadcasting from the AIS box on the ship. Again, that can be manipulated. If it was some vessel that's doing illegal activity, they could say that they weigh less. They could say that they're in a different spot. So you can't always trust it, but it's a good starting point. And the reason that I mentioned weight is very important with ships when you're tracking them, because it tells you whether it's holding cargo or not. So if you're looking at a scenario where a ship might be transporting military weapons, illegal weapons to another country. It stops at port, it weighs 5.5. When it leaves, it weighs 8.5. And then it goes to an illegal port, drops off weight, and now it's 5.5 again. You know that it has picked something up, taken it there, and dropped it off. So that is also a good way to research.
But that's assuming that they didn't manipulate it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Usually the manipulations are in who it is, like who the ship is, and where it's going. But they can manipulate anything.
So Rae, I know this is going to distract you a little bit from what you're doing, but could we use this to track? David mentioned those yachts from Russian oligarchs or other people. Could that type of a tool, that website, actually help you track smaller vessels that are not, fat and big ones?
Yep. Yeah, you can filter by ship type. So you could track cargo vessels, tankers, yachts, pleasure craft, unspecified ships. You can track all of these things present time. So you could filter it down. The easiest way to track vessels I've found, if they are more popular, is Twitter. Believe it or not, because there are a lot of OSINT analysts who are doing the same work, and they are already tracking a lot of these vessels. So the SIG is a vessel that is well known to me. It is sanctioned for transporting jet fuel to Syria illegally, and that was in 2017. It's still making the path down there. It goes down, it turns off its AIS, so it doesn't show up on the map. You can't track it, it's gone. And then it does whatever it does, and then it comes back on and it goes home. So if you go to Twitter and you type in SIG and vessel, other people are looking at these ships. So here's one post, Russian tug escorting oil, chemical tanker, SIG, and Yaz. So you can do this with the IMO numbers, the MIMSI numbers, the names. Just go to Twitter, type it in, and see if somebody else is reporting on it. And I wouldn't take that fully at face value because you don't know where they got their information, but it's a good way to start. If it says it's in a certain port, then you can go and verify that. Another thing we can do, so we looked at the cable laying ship. So that was Project Fermina and cable. Here we can see submarine cable landing license application Fermina. It's a Google cable, private subsea cable connecting all of these countries. So you get all kinds of information just right off the bat that you can work off of. I use TweetDeck. So TweetDeck is a really good way to capture all of the people that I follow who do this kind of research. So if I'm looking into Iran or Russia or China or whatever, I find people who are doing this maritime research and I add them to TweetDeck. So I have all of them side by side and every day I can check them and see what is happening.
It's amazing that you can find so much information just off Twitter.
Yeah, I use Twitter an awful lot in maritime research.
Do you find that Twitter as a platform is better for maritime OSINT than some of the other ones?
Yes. Yeah, I have not had much luck on anything other than, I will say, finding security leaks on something like TikTok. And I can show you that.
That'd be great, yes.
Yeah. So
I would never have thought of TikTok being the place to get security information, but okay, let's show us.
Well, TikTok and YouTube. So people like to show their stuff off. So if you work on a vessel and you're there all day, every day, you get bored, I'm sure. So these people make TikToks or YouTube pages where they show their everyday working on a vessel. This one guy here, he posts a lot about working on this vessel, but he does walkthrough videos.
After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
So Rae, while we're looking at this video of the inside of this ship's cockpit, command center, whatever, is what we're seeing similar to if somebody went inside of an office space and they're videoing and they get the alarm code posted on the wall and the Wi-Fi code? Is that kind of what we're seeing here?
Yeah. So if the ships are not very secure, they're getting better with maritime security, but ships are floating like ICS systems. I guess that's kind of redundant. Ships they're floating industrial control systems. All of these pieces on the ship from, what tells you how much water in the bottom, in the hull is, where you're going, which direction you're going, the steering, the GPS systems on board, all of these things, they have default credentials. They have the ability to plug in a USB and, hack them. So knowing what these systems are when they're walking through with a video and showing the exact name and version of the software and the hardware on there, that makes the ship very vulnerable. And these types of things can be found on Shodan, for instance. So the AIS systems on these ships have names. There's different software and hardware on the ship, and you can search by name. So one is the Sailor 900, and this can be searched on Shodan. So it's a VSAT, the V satellite. So if you go to Shodan and you do title Sailor 900,
Sorry, what is Sailor 900? Is that a ship or what is that?
That is a VSAT system on the ship. So that's
on a
the
specific
satellite.
ship.
That's the AIS on the ship. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So Rae, would you say that that's like the name of the web server, like Apache or Nginx or something like that? It's the name of the application that they're running?
It's the name of the technology.
The technology. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a bunch of VSATs that are connected to the internet, and you could go and you can look at them and you can find vulnerabilities this way. And if you can figure out which ship it is that is broadcasting this, that could cause a lot of problems.
So is this similar to a lot of people connect their CCTVs to Shodan and you can peer straight into their houses and stuff. It's really worrying what they're doing. This is similar to that where they're putting a lot of confidential information freely available on the internet, right?
So here's a scenario where this would be bad.
Yep.
So So if you say you are a Navy vessel, you are on a mission. You don't want anybody to know where you are because you're doing some sort of very important Navy mission. Now, somebody gets into your VSAT, your AIS, they pivot laterally through your system. Now they have access to your steering, your weight. They can control whether you sink or float because they could take on more water. They could change the AIS to broadcast that you're somewhere you're not. They could mess with the AIS so you don't realize how close you are to something else and you wreck into it. They could steer you in circles, which has happened. There's all sorts of things you can do when you manipulate the AIS and the other control systems on board.
So are you saying that I could remotely connect to a vessel and do that kind of stuff? Like I see the port numbers open there, 22, 23, Telnet. It's amazing that that's open. 80 unencrypted sessions. So I could remotely connect to a ship and do something, right?
Yes. There are plenty of ships that their systems are still on default credentials. They are not as protected as they should be. So that is definitely a worry that someone could hack into a vessel. And you think of the Ever Given that was stuck in the Suez Canal, how big that ship was. I think that was like a Supermax tanker or something, or cargo ship. So that's huge. That's one of their biggest ships. Now imagine that just like plowing into a port because somebody messed with the steering and, they can't stop it once it's going. A lot of times these vessels are connected to the port. So if you got into a ship, all of the technology is connected to the port technology. So technically, you could probably pivot to the onshore systems as well.
I mean, that's crazy. So, I mean, there's an IP address there. I see 95, 128, 19, 171. We won't do it because YouTube will ban the video and we don't want to get into trouble. But literally, I could connect to port 23 and then start snooping, doing things, breaking their systems, doing the things that you're talking about, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So the only thing, like here, you see that this is an AIS and it has the IP address, but you don't know where this AIS is. Is it a shore-based AIS system? Is it on a ship? And then you have to find the actual ship it's on. Unless you just like causing mayhem and you just pick one at random and see what you can do. But targeting a specific vessel is a lot harder.
Yes, I mean, I could randomly, it's like CCTV cameras. I could just like watch random stuff on Shodan. Here I could connect to some random ship or device and do things. Does this happen a lot where people prank ships, cause all kinds of damage? Because it sounds like really scary. It's not like, just watching someone on the street walking past on a CCTV camera. This is like crazy risky for businesses and governments and the like. Does this
They're
happen?
getting better at protecting. They're getting better at protecting ships. I know I think in 2021, they put out new guidance for cybersecurity on vessels. It's becoming more important, but it takes a while. That's just the nature of cybersecurity. Hackers will find a way. So it's relevant to everyone because of the supply chain. It would mess up our lives when we're trying to buy weird things off of Amazon and it takes 4 months to show up. It's important militarily because, we want to know what other militaries are doing. We want to know what ours are doing. And if these things are not trustworthy, how do we know what we're seeing is true? Us being the Navy or military. It's just, it's very scary.
Rae, one of the things that you were mentioning earlier is that while this is a system, we don't know whose system it is, what it's doing, where it is. And by interrogating it, by visiting some of the services, just like we'd visit somebody's computer on Shodan or on some other system to look at what it's doing, what information it's providing, then we can refine, where this is and what's happening, right?
Yeah, and I found it's very hard to figure out a specific vessel that these are connected to. A lot of these are probably land-based VSATs, if I had to guess. I haven't looked into any of them, but I would think that a lot of them are land-based. But there was just a hack of Viasat a few months ago, like a huge hack for their entire company. So, I mean, who knows what data they pulled from that, but it's still happening. It's worrisome, to say the least.
So, Rae, I mean, do you have any crazy stories? Or like, I know we spoke offline. Some of the stuff you can obviously not share publicly, which is sad. But I mean, I understand exactly, confidentiality restrictions and the like, NDAs, whatever. But do you have some stories where you can share about like guys have hacked into people have hacked into boats or ships or something that you can share along these lines about like where it's caused damage? I mean, we spoke about the Suez Canal, but that sounded like it was just someone fell asleep at the wheel or something went wrong there. But have you got some stories where, things went wrong?
A lot, yes. A lot of the stories are confidential and ongoing. So it's hard to, that's why I don't do ongoing research. If you do follow me, a lot of it is, I write blogs on things, but I'm not posting satellite images or tracking ships in real time generally, because a lot of it is stuff that I am also working on and can't talk about. But I mentioned the SIG earlier. That is probably the biggest one. I track a lot of sanctioned vessels. So vessels transporting jet fuel where they're not supposed to be, transporting arms, a lot of Russian type of activity and how the military moves. I don't really have any stories that I can talk about without being fired.
There have been some events out there. I've seen them from people that are doing open source intelligence and kind of satellite imagery analysis. And Rae, I'm sure you've seen some of these things too, where they will show some satellite imagery from the middle of the ocean, and you see these two vessels approaching, and then they are ship to ship touching, doing something. Sometimes the satellite imagery is so good you can see their cargo holds open on one ship or open on the other ship. Just depends on when the satellites fly over, and then taking those satellite images, matching it with the trails of the ship, where they've been, where they're going, getting the information from AIS, if that's being broadcast, you can really put together a nice picture of, hey, look, this vessel over here is meeting with a vessel from a foreign country, doing something in the middle of the ocean, and then going their separate ways. Do you recall seeing those types of things online?
Yes. So when I'm talking about tracking sanctioned vessels, that's a lot of it. Okay. A lot of the fuel transfers are through ship-to-ship transfers, and that's exactly what you're talking about, where a ship comes from one country and they come to like a neutral area, maybe in the Singapore Strait is a good one. There's lots of ship-to-ship transfers there. They come down, and then another ship will come down from China or something, meet it. They will stop in the middle of the ocean. They will transfer oil for a few hours, and then they'll go their separate ways. And they'll turn their AIS off, so you won't be able to track them. So you have to do it via satellite. And if you've ever tracked anything via satellite, it is very hit or miss. You have to pore over the images to try and catch a specific time when there's no clouds and catch these ships side by side. This is how I track them. And then I go to Twitter and see if anybody else has been tracking them, or I look at their previous path. A lot of vessel tracking is baselining an area, seeing what traditionally goes on there, and then noting what is different. So if a vessel always goes from point A to B over and over and over, and then one day it goes way off course, to see why. I want to know why it's doing that.
Do you have a website where you can see satellite images? The only one I can think of is Google Maps, but I mean, is there something more specific?
So as far as free satellite goes, this is the one I use often. And you can go to soar.earth and then Sentinel, and then you draw.
So that's pulling it in real time from the satellite?
It pulls it from the date that it shows here. So whenever the satellite passed over, and that's the tricky part. So like here, you see it has 12th, 17th, 22nd. So if your ship was there in between any of those dates, you're not going to have the visual. Also, depending on the area, you will get a lot of cloud cover. There we go. We have a ship in port here in Jacksonville, Florida on August 1st. Try July 22nd. They moved a little bit. This one's on its way. It's a little blurry, but depending on the day and the satellite that went over, you can get. So you could track it. You could track if something was being built. Oftentimes in the Northern Sea Route, they're building a whole bunch of new ports. Russia is, and China, they're building all kinds of ports. So you can track via satellite the progress. China just built a large aircraft carrier. China just built this aircraft carrier, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but it's supposedly the closest one to the size of our Ford class, which is the biggest. and they've been working on this. The progress has been available on satellite.
One of the things that we can do is use that satellite imagery that we were talking about. And there's actually lots of free satellite imagery. You know about Google Maps and how you can click that, but there's a really neat interface to Google Maps and even historical maps in Google Earth Pro. I'm using the desktop client, which is free from Google. There's also web interfaces. Let's just head to the shipyards, right? Let's go to Norfolk, Virginia. I know in Norfolk, Virginia, there is a shipyard, so I'm just going to search there. We zoom in and we look for a place that has a lot of docks with lots of open room. Let's just see up here. Oh, yeah, there we go. Hey, those look like some aircraft carriers, right? Now, the neat thing about Google Earth, one, it's free and it brings in a whole bunch of different data. So not just that data about, like what's there right now, the current version, but it has this little back in time feature up here. It allows us to see historic imagery. And you can see we can go back to 1985. Not so sure I want to go back that far, but you can see back here we have in the most recent images here, we have this aircraft carrier. There's actually an aircraft on the carrier runway. And then we can just circle back through and look at from October 2020. Oh, look, there are some different vessels. Yep, some different vessels there. And what we can do is track the ships and figure out who's back for maintenance, who's out doing stuff. You see some other vessels here. We can actually even zoom in so much, or maybe even middle click, turn on 3D buildings. Let's see if this works. Sometimes it does. We can get a 3D perspective, read the serial numbers or the ship vessel numbers on the sides of the ship. All right, maybe in this case it's not happening, but this allows us to tell us allows us to figure out where these vessels are and what they're doing.
And aside from the vessels, the ports are very interesting because all of the ports have businesses and all of those businesses support the port. If we go back to the illegal activity aspect, they have to offload the illegal cargo on the end. So we would want to know the organizations that are at the port, who's benefiting from that, where the money's going. So looking at the port buildings on satellite or in corporate registries, that's all important as well.
Here we've got some 3D vessels.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
But that's good because you can see the technology on board. You can see if it has satellites or, if it's a research vessel, you might be able to see what types of satellites they have on there.
Yep. And here's vessel number 7 and 3. We can also do other stuff on here, crazy stuff like measuring the length of the vessel. This, we can go and take the length of the vessel, what we see here, and then head off to resources like Wikipedia and other places to figure out what vessel this is. So here in the Naval Shipyard, might not be that big of a deal. We might not really care about this vessel, but there are many open resources out there that Rae knows and many people in the community know that will allow you to take this image of what this vessel looks like and match it and figure out who owns it, where it is. So whereas here it's in the Norfolk Naval Shipyards, it's kind of easy to understand who owns it. If it was out on the waters, we might need some help. So there's lots of resources out there.
And I'll tell you, measuring a ship is super important because when you're looking down at a ship from satellite, the only identifiers are how long and wide it is, the color of the deck, and the structures that stick out. So knowing how long a ship is supposed to be and how big it actually is, you can kind of determine if it's the ship you're looking for, if it matches the identity. So if we go to the same port, so we have some ships in the same area that we were just looking. Let's see if any are broadcasting. We can filter. So we have 2. We have U.S. government vessel and Montford Point. That is the Montford Point. It's a heavy load carrier. And U.S. government vessel that looks like an aircraft carrier that we just looked at.
It's a free tool once again.
Yes, this is a free tool, vesselfinder.com. Again, it only tracks in real time. It won't give you historical unless you pay, but you can do a lot with what's free.
So Rae, if I was standing across that little bay there or that little inlet and I saw this aircraft carrier, I could amaze and astound my family and go, that is the U.S. government vessel, right? Just by using this tool.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you'd have to match up the name, and they like to name it these vague U.S. government vessel, but you could go and you can get a list of, operational units, and you can narrow it down by the way it looks. So it's a pretty short list here of aircraft carriers, and they have numbers. So CVN 73, it would probably say that somewhere on it, on the side, on the deck, and you can match up the way it looks with the satellite picture. They're not all exactly the same. So you can narrow it down by military vessels. We could take that off, and we could go to yachts. So now we see all the yachts in the area. Lots of yachts in Norfolk. So you could track them. You could find out their ownership, see who owns them. If it's a business, you could track the business then back.
I mean, I suppose if you really wanted to get serious, you'd pay for the historical data. Is that right? So you can see where something's been.
Yes, the historical data is the best. But you can also, if it is a popular ship, you can go to Twitter, and a lot of people who already pay for the historical data will give you that same information, which is what I do. That's how I get around. So we found the Fermina, and that it is a Google contract. So it's the Google line under the water, the Google cable. So if we search Ocean, Titan, and vessel, and Fermina, we get details about the Ocean Titan, the marine traffic, and vessel finder. So it says it's in Jacksonville, Florida, which we already figured out. It gives us the IMO number, the position, voyage data. What it doesn't give us is who owns it. So we need to figure out who owns it to figure out who's benefiting from its work, what it's doing. So a Google search shows us that and we don't have to pay to subscribe for this because it gives us the details right at the top here. So this U.S. research vessel owner claims a lien on data and charter hire dispute. So it's some dispute they're having, and it says the Pacific Survey Group is the owner of the Ocean Titan. So Pacific Survey Group, and it shows us there's the Ocean Titan. So now we know the Pacific Survey Group owns them, and they do a lot of subsea research, collaboration, and then if we click around their website, we could find not much about them, I guess, but we could go to Open Pacific Survey Group, and Open Corporates is another free corporate research site. So if we search for Pacific Survey Group, we get Pacific Survey Group LLC. It's in Washington, and that's said Washington on that website. So we can get details about the company, the agent name, the agent address, registry page. We get some annual reports, which would give more information. You can get the people who own the company. And we could just keep digging on this until we get their entire corporate history if they're publishing their annual reports. So you can see that if you were tracking something that was sanctioned, how you could figure out where the money's going, because you could do the research into the company and then you could pivot to the people who own the company and then who they're affiliated with, what government they're working for, things like that. So if it was a sanctioned thing, we could go to OFAC has a sanctions search. So the Office of Foreign Asset Control, and you can go to the sanctions search and you can look up a vessel, you can look up an IMO number, a company. So if we go back to the SIG, which I mentioned before, that was transporting jet fuel to Syria, and we type in SIG, so we get, right off the bat, we get that it's a vessel flag, it's flagged Russia. So that is the flag that it uses. It's linked to this company Transpetro chart, which if you looked up is also sanctioned, and it gives it an IMO number. So we can now track this vessel if we didn't have the IMO number. So we could look into this deeper. We could go to search for Transpetro chart. So it gives us an address, it gives us details, and you can download the list that will tell you more details, or we can just search. So Transpetro chart and sanctions. So it shows us the sanction details, that they're taking action. They're on the U.S. entities list. It gives us all kinds of details about the jet fuel shipments and who's associated and other companies that are also sanctioned along with it. And we could build out a whole chart of connections between the vessels and the people and the companies. And that's what I like to do. I like making huge charts of connections. That's what I find fun.
So, I mean, would companies pay you for this kind of data? Because let's say they want to deal with some overseas, let's say it's a US company wants to deal with an overseas company. Would they hire you to try and make sure that it's not on a sanctions list? I mean, I understand the military sort of angle, but I suppose in corporate, this is also important, right?
Yeah, it's important for due diligence just to make sure that you aren't working with a company that is sanctioned or is working with another. Like a lot of times it's several degrees of separation, degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon. Like all of these ships are working for shell companies who are under shell companies. And it's like this buried list of companies that you need to investigate to determine whether it's a decent company that you want to work with or not. Like this Transpetro chart is just like at the top, and then you have to figure out what other companies it owns. And they make companies just to own one ship. So if you look up one singular ship, it will be the only thing that company owns, and that's it. So it's maritime is very strange. It's very in-depth. There's lots of things to look into. I find it very fun.
I'm just amazed how much you can find online.
Yeah, there's so much available for free, and you can make connections and dig around, and it crosses so many facets of OSINT. So maybe you're just into corporate research, but now you have a corporate entity that is connected to a vessel. So now it's crossed into maritime. Maybe you do like subject intelligence or human intelligence. Like that has now become important because you're tracking the crew on the vessel, the people running the companies behind these vessels, geospatial intelligence and things like that. You're looking at satellite pictures of vessels, image analysis. You're looking at the pictures of the vessels and trying to figure out if the vessels match up. And they do some weird things to cover up who they are. Like they do some weird things when they're trying to hide who they are. So they will, if they're transporting something illegal, they don't want you to know who they are. So they will repaint the entire deck a different color. So you can't track it on the satellite. You won't know that it's the same ship. They will cover the ship in tarps so it looks like a different color. They will paint letters on the side off. So, it might be Dane is the name, and they'll paint off the E and it's just Dan. Like they manipulate it so that ship spotters, they take a picture, the name on the side's different, or they'll throw a tarp over a letter. It's very weird how they try and get away with illegal shipments.
I mean, it's a big problem, isn't it? I mean, apart from the military stuff, I mean, there's a lot of stuff being smuggled all around the world, right?
Yes, there is. And I don't think people realize, like, the ocean is big. It is when you're trying to find a ship in the middle of the ocean, it's huge. And you can do so much stuff without being monitored out there. And that's how these ship-to-ship transfers and things like that happen. Somebody has to look into that. Somebody has to monitor it. And it takes so much manpower because it's so big. And then on top of that, you have to monitor the ports and you have to monitor the technology on the ship. It's a lot.
So I want to talk about the technology on the ships. Are you saying that it's a lot of like SCADA, ICS, old stuff, right? That is often default passwords. It's easy to hack, right?
Yeah. They don't change the passwords. It's older technology. You have so many crew members that come on. I mean, the old drop the USB outside the building and see who plugs it in. It works the same in a ship. I mean, a lot of the technology is very similar. So anything that you could do to an industrial control system in like a manufacturing plant can be done on a ship.
And so that happens like the rubber ducky type thing where you drop a USB outside of a building, like in Mr. Robot. That kind of thing happens with ships as well. People drop
it could, yeah.
Go on.
I was just going to say that it could, yeah. If you drop a USB outside of a ship, even a Navy ship, you would think like all of these. How many people go in and off of a ship in a day in the military? They might be more trained than someone on a cruise ship, but a cruise ship, if you took control of a cruise ship, could still cause damage. So I think it's just as vulnerable as any system.
I mean, we're looking more at the OSINT side of ships, but there's obviously a whole massive gap in the security side of this.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, it's becoming more important. People are looking into it. There is a lot of maritime security that's being implemented, but it's it's only as good as its users. Like you can only make it so secure.
I mean, I know you can't tell stories of your own, but have you got any stories that you've read about or that you can tell us that of crazy stuff? I just want to pitch it up and not put you on a spot. Go on.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, I really like the spoofing stories. So where ships are pretending to be one place when they're not. There was one in Crimea recently, maybe last year, and it hit national news. I mean, you probably heard of it. There was a ship. It was supposed to be our Navy ship got too close to Crimea. There were stories about Russia firing at the ship and all this stuff that happened. And somebody went on a web camera in a port, because you can view web cameras in ports as another method to verify. Someone verified that the ship was actually in port at the time. It wasn't there. It never went near Crimea. Someone had spoofed the ship AIS to show that it was there, but it was not actually there. So you can see how something like that would cause like a big geopolitical like firestorm when you're faking that military is where it's not supposed to be in a contested area. And this happens with China a lot.
So let's come back to China because that's another kind of worms. Sorry, just remind us of the story. So was it Russia was saying it was a U.S. military ship that was too close to Crimea, but actually that U.S. military ship was in port. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And that was verified because someone found webcam footage from the port.
Yeah, and that was on Twitter. An analyst had found a webcam at the port. I want to say a Sevastopol, but I'm not 100% without looking. But there was a webcam picture, like a live webcam of the ship in the port at that time. So it was not there. Nothing was there. And I find that really interesting.
Well, I mean, it's amazing because that could have started. Well, I don't want to get into that, but that could have started a huge problem, and that was proven to be incorrect. And I mean, we've mentioned there's a lot of geopolitical tensions, for lack of a better word, at the moment. And have you got some stories from like the China sort of South Seas type thing? Because I believe there's a lot of stuff happening there as well.
Have you ever heard of the maritime militia?
No.
The maritime militia is a Chinese force that they use. They won't admit it. They don't really talk about it. It's they pay fishing vessels. They pay people who run fishing vessels to be part of a militia. So when they call on them to do something like a show of force, they have hundreds of vessels just lying in wait, and they reinforce them with, I don't know, metal or whatever in the front so they could ram other ships if they needed to. But they call them the maritime militia. And maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, there were some news stories. They do shows of force where they will just line the ships up near the islands there, the Spratlys, just to look forceful there. And because the contested waters around Taiwan, there's a lot of use of the maritime militia just to intimidate. And I believe one rammed into one of our Navy ships at one point.
Have you got any stories from Somalia has been a hotspot for a few years. Have you got any stories from that part of the world?
Somalia pirates do exist. They still exist. They do pirate. They attack vessels down there. Not so much recently. There have not been too many stories of Somali pirates causing any problems down there. It's mostly Russia and China. So there's a free live piracy map. So it will show incidents of piracy. So you can see here it has like attempted attack, boarded, fired upon, hijacked. And if you click on these, it gives you details about what happened. All crew taken as hostage, detained on the bridge.
That's interesting. So there's not so many in Somalia anymore. I see Ivory Coast, other parts of the world. If you can go to the one near Mozambique, that's an interesting one for me, just from that part of the world where I come from, down south. The one right on the south of Africa. Sorry, that's interesting. That's Durban, so that's in South Africa. So that's interesting. So Rae, thanks so much for sharing all this information in this sort of interview. Where can people learn more? Are you on Twitter? Are there any other resources that you'd recommend? Where can people follow you?
I am on Twitter, and that's usually where you can get me the fastest. Wondersmith_Rae. I'm also on YouTube. I have some YouTube videos up walking through how to do some maritime intelligence type stuff. I also have a book coming out from Wiley Tech in 2023, and Micah is doing the foreword. It's called Deep Dive Exploring the Real World Value of Open Source Intelligence, and I cover a whole breadth of topics, not just maritime. So it's how to get into OSINT, an intro to OSINT, and then subject intelligence and ICS SCADA systems and Wi-Fi enumeration and all sorts of image analysis and transportation intelligence.
Rae, I really want to thank you for presenting. And Micah, thanks for introducing us and arranging this. I really want to thank both of you for sharing your knowledge. OSINT is a whole big world, and every time I speak to the team from OSINT Curious, I learn something. So just to the audience, please put comments below, stuff that you'd like us to see, the kind of experts that you'd like to me to talk to and Micah to introduce me to, and the types of topics that you want us to cover. Ships, vessels, all this stuff is a whole new world that I didn't know much about. So I really want to thank you, Rae, for sharing your knowledge. Again, to the audience, please put below comments of stuff that you want to see, and we'll see if we can set it up. Thanks to both of you for sharing.
Thanks. It was great to be here.
Thanks for having me, David.